The 1970 Pontiac GTO Judge wasn't just a random car, it was a legendary icon of its time. With its wild design and beastly power, it ruled the streets. But under the hood and behind the stripes, this Judge hid secrets that even muscle car fans still don't know. Back in the day, the Pontiac GTO was the king of cool. It was born in 1964 as a sportier version of the Tempest, built for younger drivers who wanted power, speed, and style. By sneaking in a big 390 cubic inch engine when others were limited to 329 cubic inches, Pontiac broke the rules and created one of the first real muscle cars. Fast forward to 1970, and the GTO looked tougher than ever. Some called it a rolling sculpture. But as bold as it looked, something else was happening underneath. Sales were starting to slide. Insurance costs were rising. New pollution rules were creeping in. The car market was shifting, and even the mighty GTO wasn't safe. Still, the Judge stood strong. And behind the famous name, wild colors and powerful engine, the 1970 GTO Judge had secrets. Some were smart, some were strange, and some were total surprises. So here are the 10 unknown secrets about the 1970 Pontiac GTO Judge that most people have never heard of. Number 1. The name Judge was inspired by a popular comedy skit from the 60s. Back in the late 1960s, muscle cars were more than just fast machines. They were symbols, loud, proud, and full of attitude. And when Pontiac was getting ready to launch a bold new version of its famous GTO, they needed a name that would hit hard and make people laugh. Believe it or not, the name didn't come from car experts or engineers. It came from a television comedy show. Yes, you heard that right. One of the most legendary muscle cars of all time got its name from a joke. Let's go back in time. The year was 1968. Millions of Americans were tuning in every week to a hit comedy show called Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In. It was fast-paced, silly, and full of wild jokes that matched the hippie culture spreading across the country. One of the most popular skits was called Here Comes the Judge. In the sketch, a funny old-fashioned judge in a white wig would toss out silly rulings with a cartoonish gavel, cracking up the audience every time. The sketch first came from a soul music hit written in 1968 by Dewey Pigmeat Markham, a comedian known for his big personality. His song had a hook that shouted, "Here comes the judge." That catchphrase became so famous that the TV show turned it into a recurring act. Later, Sammy Davis Jr., a major entertainer and member of the Rat Pack, took the joke to new levels with dances, songs, and laughs. At the same time, John DeLorean, the head of Pontiac's performance division, was working on a new version of the GTO. He was a big fan of Laugh-In and loved the Judge sketch so much it stuck in his head. The plan had been to call the car the GTOE/T, which stood for elapsed time, a racing term. But DeLorean thought it sounded too boring. He wanted something funny, something catchy, something that would grab the youth of America. And just like that, the Judge was born. The Judge made its grand debut on December 8, 1968. Pontiac introduced it at the famous Riverside Raceway in California, and on the same day, they showed off their brand new Trans Am. The press was stunned. Bright colors, bold stripes, and a wild attitude made the Judge stand out. It didn't just look good, it was fast too. Under the hood, you could get a powerful 325 horsepower engine or even upgrade to a tri-power version that cranked out 348 horsepower. That meant 0 to 60 miles per hour in just 6.6 seconds. The quarter mile? 14.8 seconds flat. It was built to rule the streets, and it did. But Pontiac didn't stop at the car. They leaned into the comedy theme with full force. Slogans like "All rise for the Judge" and "The Judge can be bought" appeared in ads everywhere. It was loud, it was proud, and it was funny. From 1969 to 1971, Pontiac only sold 11,004 GTO Judges, making it one of the rarest GTOs ever made. But even if you never saw one in person, you might have seen it on screen. A bright orbit orange, 1970 Judge even starred in the cult car movie Two-Lane Blacktop. That's how the Judge made its ruling in the world of cars, with power, personality, and just the right punchline. Number 2, a rarest GTO Judge. The 1970 Pontiac GTO Judge is one of the rarest muscle cars in American history. And here's the shocking secret. Only a little more than 3,500 of them were ever built. In the year 1970, Pontiac created a special version of their already powerful GTO. They added bright colors, bold stripes, and a spoiler. They called it the Judge. It stood out, it made noise, and it looked like it belonged on a racetrack. But what made it truly rare wasn't just the design. It was how few ever left the factory. Pontiac made exactly 3,797 GTO Judge cars that year. That's it. Not 10,000. Not even 5,000. Just under 4,000 total. This number includes both hardtop coupes and convertibles. But the story gets even more surprising. Out of those 3,797 cars, only 168 were convertibles. These were the soft-top versions that could fold down. That's fewer than 200 in the whole world. The rest were all hardtops, which were much more common. But there's an even deeper secret. Pontiac offered a special engine upgrade called the Ram Air 4. It was a powerful beast, 400 cubic inches of muscle, delivering 445 pound-feet of torque. This engine didn't come cheap. It added $390 to the price back in 1970, and that meant most people didn't choose it. Because of that, only 17 GTO Judge convertibles were ever made with a Ram Air 4 engine. Just 17 in the entire world had this exact setup. Now here's the rarest version of all, a GTO Judge convertible with both the Ram Air 4 engine and an automatic transmission known as the Turbo Hydromatic 400. This combo was the top of the line. Pontiac only built 7 of these. Just 7 cars in the world with this engine and transmission combination under a soft top. Well, most of the GTO Judges people talk about today are hard tops. That's because the convertibles were always far more limited. Add in the rare Ram Air 4 engine, and even fewer exist. Throw in the automatic transmission on top of that, and you're down to single digits. Only a few people on Earth have ever owned one of those 7 convertibles with that exact setup. Even when the car first came out, buyers didn't fully understand how limited it was. But collectors today know the truth. And that's why, when one of those 7 cars shows up at auction, the price shoots sky high. Number 3, built for drag racing. The 1970 Pontiac GTO Judge had a secret weapon hidden under its hood. This wasn't just any engine. It was called the Ram Air 4. And what made it so special? You might think of this GTO as the other ones, but do you know this GTO was actually built for one thing? That is drag racing. Let's get into it. First, talk about what this Pontiac did differently. Unlike some of its muscle car rivals, Pontiac never gave the GTO a factory rating higher than 400 horsepower. That's right. While other brands chase bigger numbers, Pontiac kept things just under the limit. But don't let that fool you. The Ram Air 4 engine was small in number, but huge in power. And it didn't need wild numbers to prove it. The way it was built told the whole story. This engine started as a 400 cubic inch V8 block. But Pontiac didn't stop there. They added big changes to make it something truly wild. First, it had a special aluminum intake manifold that helped air and fuel move faster into the engine. Then they gave it unique cylinder heads with raised intake ports and round exhaust ports. That meant more air got in and more power came out. A bigger camshaft was added too. That piece controlled the way the engine breathed, and it gave the Ram Air 4 its loud, sharp sound. To top it all off, the car had real, working air scoops on the hood that fed fresh air right into the engine. From the factory, this setup was rated at 370 horsepower at 5,500 revolutions per minute. It also made 445 pound-feet of torque at 3,900 revolutions per minute. That kind of torque is what slams your back into the seat when the light turns green. The Ram Air 4 wasn't just numbers on paper. It was built to dominate the drag strip. In the early 1970s, racers knew what this engine could really do. Even though Pontiac listed it at 370 horsepower, many believed it made much more, closer to 450. That's why it became a favorite among serious racers who wanted something fast right off the showroom floor. This engine helped the GTO Judge go from 0 to 60 miles per hour in around 7 seconds. That was lightning fast for a car you could drive every day. Even better, it could run a full quarter mile in under 15 seconds. On drag strips across America, GTO Judges with the Ram Air 4 were known for lining up against the best of the best and winning. The car didn't just move fast, it looked fast too. The giant hood scoops were not just for show, they were real. They pulled cold air right into the engine, which gave it more power, especially during hard launches. These scoops wore bold Ram Air 4 stickers, a badge that let everyone know this car was no joke. The entire look of the GTO Judge screamed speed, but the Ram Air 4 made sure it could back that up. Another interesting part? Drivers had a choice. You could get the Ram Air 4 with a manual stick shift, or you could choose the automatic turbo hydromatic 400. Either way, it gave you all the power you needed to blast down a straight track and leave others in the dust. Not many people ordered this version. It cost more. It was louder, it was harder to control, but that's what made it perfect for racers. This wasn't the engine for someone who just wanted to cruise around town. This was for people who wanted to tear up the drag strip on Saturday night and win. Today, car collectors still dream about finding a true 1970 GTO Judge with the Ram Air 4 engine. Not just because it's rare, but because it was made for action. Number 4, Hurst THandle floor shifter. Other than the unbeatable powerhouse, the GTO had one more secret that wasn't hiding under the hood. It was right between the seats. This wasn't just a regular stick shift. It was the bold and famous Hurst THandle floor shifter, and it changed everything about the way this car drove. If you wanted to slam gears like a real racer, this was the tool for the job. Now, most muscle cars came with plain gear knobs, just little round balls that drivers had to hold on to while shifting. But as cars got faster, those old knobs didn't do the trick anymore. They slipped, they spun, and they just couldn't keep up with all the shaking and speed. Drivers needed something better, something stronger. That's when the Hurst THandle came flying onto the scene. This T-handle wasn't shaped like a ball at all. It looked more like a bar. Drivers could grip it with their whole hand and yank it with real force. That made it easier to shift fast, especially when the car was roaring down the track or screaming through the gears. The 1970 GTO Judge with the 4-speed manual came standard with this Hurst shifter, and it made every drive feel like a drag race. The shifter itself wasn't just about looks, it had real power behind it. Hurst made sure their floor shifters had short throws, which meant the stick didn't need to move far to hit the next gear. That meant faster shifts, smoother launches, and more control when things got wild. Every click of the shifter felt tight, sharp, and solid. No more guessing, no more grinding. Just clean, strong gear changes that made the GTO Judge feel like a rocket. Inside the car, the polished or brushed metal T-handle looked tough and clean. It had the Hurst name proudly stamped across the top, like a badge of honor. For drivers back then, this little piece of gear made the Judge feel like a true race machine. When the hood-mounted tachometer showed the needle hitting the red line, the driver's hand was already gripping the Hurst handle, ready to shift hard into the next gear. But this wasn't just about cool looks and fast moves. There was the real history behind that shifter. The Hurst company started back in the year 1958. At first, they just made motor mounts. But George Hurst, the founder, had a bigger dream. He wanted to build performance parts that anyone could use, and that dream led to the world's best-known shifters. By the end of the 1960s, the Hurst name was everywhere. Their shifters were on NHRA dragsters, NASCAR stock cars, and even Indy cars. The company didn't stop at shifters either. They built everything from racing gloves to clutches and brakes. They even helped invent the first version of the Jaws of Life tool used by firefighters to rescue crash victims. However, through all those inventions, the Hurst T-handle remained one of their most famous pieces. Pontiac saw the magic early on. In the year 1964, they started using Hurst shifters in the very first GTOs. At first, the handles didn't even say Hurst on them, but by 1965, that iconic name was there for all to see. When the 1970 GTO Judge hit the road, the 4-speed version proudly came with a factory-installed Hurst T-handle, no extra charge needed. Hurst didn't just sell shifters. They sold style. They ran contests, gave away custom cars, and even had Miss Hurst Golden Shifter models at racetracks, like the legendary Linda Vaughn, who waved from the trunks of race-prepped muscle cars with giant shifters mounted on the back. Hurst made shifting fun, fast, and famous. And for drivers who wanted a little more, Hurst had something extra. Some T-handles came with a button built in. That button could be wired to control a line lock, nitrous, or even a trans brake, giving racers even more tools at their fingertips. Imagine launching your GTO Judge at the drag strip, hitting a button on the shifter to lock the front brakes, then dropping the clutch and blasting off in a cloud of smoke. It was power, control, and fun, all rolled into one shiny handle. So while the outside of the 1970 Pontiac GTO Judge grabbed attention with stripes and scoops, the real thrill might have been right inside the cabin. Number 5. Tachometer mounted on the hood. Next up, this Pontiac did something totally wild. It placed the tachometer right on top of the hood. Yes, not behind the steering wheel, not buried in the dash, but outside the car, right in front of the driver's face, where it could scream out the engine's revolutions per minute like a tiny tower of speed. It all started with a man named Ron Hill, a designer for General Motors. He looked at the packed dashboards of full-size Pontiacs and thought, why not move something out of the way? So he dreamed up the hood-mounted tachometer. It had a rounded shape, stood proudly outside, and gave the driver a direct look at the engine's power in real time. The idea was so new and bold that General Motors even gave him a patent for it. At first, in the year 1967, this cool tack was a dealer-installed accessory. That meant you had to ask for it after buying your car. But soon it became a full factory-installed option. And by the time the 1970 GTO Judge rolled out, it was one of the flashiest, most talked-about features on the car. Well, the tachometer was no toy. It had a needle that swept across 180 degrees, showing every jump of the engine's revolutions per minute. The numbers were marked in 200 revolutions per minute increments. And the red line, where things got really exciting, started at 5,100 revolutions per minute for V8 engines. If the car had the OHC6 engine, the red line was set even higher at 6,500 revolutions per minute. The face of the tack had the word Pontiac written across it and showed RPM x 100, so drivers could do the math quickly. For example, if the needle pointed to 60, the engine was spinning at 6,000 revolutions per minute. It was painted with a steel blue background and white characters, so it stood out even at high speed. And here's the best part. Because the tack was mounted on the hood, drivers didn't have to look down to see it. That saved precious time when shifting fast, especially on a racetrack or even just launching off a stoplight. Now, not everyone loved the hood tack right away. Some said it was too risky to mount something electronic outside, where rain, wind, and sunlight could hit it. Others worried about theft, since the tack was right there for anyone to see. But Pontiac had answers. They sealed the unit to keep out water, and they made it harder to steal by using 2 pop rivets and 2 studs with nuts. That meant it wasn't going anywhere without a serious fight. Even the design changed over time. In 1968, Pontiac gave the hood tack a lower profile and made the housing a little shorter. The face was also redesigned, RPM x 100 was taken off, and RPM was added to the needle's base cover instead. The font changed, the hash marks moved, and the red line stayed the same on some models, but was bumped up to 5,500 revolutions per minute on certain engines like the Ram Air 2 400. Not only this, but the lighting got upgraded too. The 1967 model used just 1 bulb, which made it pretty dim at night. But in 1968 and beyond, Pontiac added 2 bulbs so drivers could see the tack clearly even in the dark. By 1970, Pontiac added a new feature to help with fogging problems. Because the tack was outside, it sometimes got cloudy on the inside. So they installed a hose from the heater box that sent warm air to the tack to keep the lens clear. That same year, they also changed the red line color to orange, making it pop even more when the engine was running hot. The hood-mounted tack stayed on GTOs through 1972, but by the final year, it was only available from dealers. Still, people loved it. It made the car feel different, more like a race car, more like something special, and it looked cool too. There was nothing else like it on the road. To this day, collectors and fans remember it as one of the boldest, strangest, and smartest design choices ever made on a muscle car. Number 6, Endura plastic made the nose. Picture this. It's the year 1968. It's John DeLorean, the famous Pontiac boss, and he's holding a giant sledgehammer. But what is he doing? Why is he standing next to a shiny red Pontiac GTO with that heavy hammer? Then, without warning, he slams the sledgehammer right into the front bumper of the car. You expect dents, cracks, and maybe even pieces flying off, but nothing happens. The bumper just pops back into shape like nothing touched it. Your jaw drops. You've never seen anything like that before. This wasn't a trick. That strange, tough bumper had a name, Endura. And by the year 1970, the Pontiac GTO Judge had one of these futuristic bumpers right on its nose. This was not some shiny chrome like every other car on the street. Nope, this was flexible, body-colored Endura plastic, and it was made to take a beating. So, what was it really? The Endura bumper wasn't just rubber. It was a mix of closed-cell urethane foam wrapped around a strong steel frame. That foam acted like armor. It was thick, it was springy, and it had a superpower. It could take a hit and bounce right back to shape. Some people even called it miracle material. It had memory, meaning it remembered how it was shaped and would snap back after getting pushed. And Pontiac didn't just tell people about it, they showed it off. In TV ads, they had men in white lab coats hitting the car's nose with crowbars. Over and over. The bumper never cracked, never bent, never chipped. The voice in the commercial said maybe that's why Motor Trend gave the GTO the award for Car of the Year. It wasn't just fast, it was smart. Until Endura came along, every car had those shiny bolt-on chrome bumpers that looked like giant mustaches. They stuck out and never really fit the car's shape. But Endura changed everything. It allowed designers to blend the bumper into the body, making it look like one smooth, painted piece. The GTO's face looked mean, tight, and powerful. It was all muscle with no fluff. One expert, Albert Drake, said the Endura bumper was heat-resistant, fire-retardant, and totally unaffected by things like gasoline, oil, acid, salt water, or even sunlight. That's right, this thing could survive in the garage, at the beach, in the desert, or even under a fire hose. But it wasn't all perfect. Over time, people noticed some small problems. Cars that sat in the hot sun, like in California or the Southwest, started to show cracks in the paint. Sometimes the plastic itself would crack. And even though Pontiac made the shape strong, the fit at the factory wasn't always great. Restorers later had to grind, fill, and paint the bumpers carefully to make them look just right again. Still, the GTO's Endura bumper was way ahead of its time. In fact, it was so cool that other cars copied the idea. The Camaro, the Barracuda, and the Challenger all added similar bumpers in the years after. They called them elastomeric bumpers, but everyone knew where the idea started, from the Pontiac GTO Judge. The best part? This tough bumper didn't just protect the car, it helped give the GTO its bold, fearless look. No shiny chrome smile here, just a painted fist pointed right at the road. That's why people still remember the Endura nose today. Number 7, the muscle makeover that made rivals nervous.
All right, let's take it.
In 1970, Pontiac didn't toss out the whole design for this version of GTO from the year before. The 1969 GTO already had that famous semi-fastback shape and twin scoops on the hood. So instead of starting over, Pontiac decided to sharpen it. First, they took the front end and stretched it forward. Just a little, but that tiny stretch gave the car a long, powerful nose, kind of like a Firebird, but angrier. Then came the grille. That classic split grille wasn't thrown away. Instead, Pontiac pushed it inward and made the corners rounder. This small change made the car look like it was leaning forward, ready to strike. But they didn't stop there. The headlights got a bold new upgrade. Pontiac squared off the bezels, those little frames around each light, and pushed them out. Now the headlights didn't just shine, they glared. When the GTO came up in someone's rearview mirror, those squared-off lights looked like eyes staring straight ahead, daring other cars to get out of the way. And down along the sides, more changes. The wheel guards were flattened out. Sounds simple, right? But it worked like magic. That one change made the car look lower, wider, and tougher. The front and rear fenders were shaped to match, giving the whole body a fighting stance, like a boxer in the ring. Even though it wasn't a total redesign, the new body made this GTO stand out like never before. It still had the soul of the earlier models, but now it looked like it had spent the off-season lifting weights. Gone were the gentle curves. The 1970 GTO showed up with sharp edges and flat lines, and it looked like it meant business. Some people wanted to mix a little fun with all that muscle. That's where the GTO Judge trim came in. With it, buyers could dress up their beast with bright, groovy colors and wild tricolor stripes. Even though it was painted like a rainbow, this car still looked like it could outrun anything in its way. To many fans, Pontiac never made a better-looking GTO. The design was bold but not overdone. It had style, but it also had muscle. And if it pulled up next to you at a red light, you knew better than to race it. Number 8, the logo and its origins. It all started with a pencil, a magazine, and a man named Bill Porter. While most people were busy building engines and bending metal, Porter was handed a different job, designing the logo for the 1970 Pontiac GTO Judge. Sounds simple, right? But what he created became one of the most talked about car emblems of all time. Porter wasn't an engineer like John DeLorean or the others on the team. He was a career designer at General Motors, a man who paid attention to shapes, letters, and how they made people feel. One day, while flipping through a magazine, something caught his eye. It was an advertisement for Carter's India ink. Strange inspiration? Maybe, but to Porter, it was perfect. He grabbed a pencil and started sketching. No computer, no fancy tools, just a simple drawing on paper. From that quiet moment came the bold, sharp logo that would land right on the front fender of every single Judge built. That little piece of art told the world this car was different. But the surprises didn't stop there. By the time the GTO hit the streets, people were already calling it something new. The GOAT. Not because it was the greatest of all time, but because no one had used that phrase back then. This nickname came from the letters themselves. GTO. Say it fast a few times, and it starts to sound like GOAT. It was short, easy to say, and just like the car, kind of rebellious. Even the marketers couldn't keep up. Pontiac had launched wild campaigns with names like the Tiger, the Great One, and even the Humbler. All of those came from a team led by advertising genius Jim Wangers. He gave each version of the GTO its own identity. But out on the streets, kids didn't care about ad slogans. They called it the GOAT, and the name stuck. By 1969, Pontiac gave in. One ad backed by DeLorean and Wangers actually used the word GOAT. Some folks at the company didn't like it. They thought it sounded too rough, but the name had already spread like wildfire. Number 9, no replacement for displacement. In 1970, people didn't just call GTO Judge a muscle car, they called it a monster. And here's why. Pontiac had a secret formula. It was not about fancy tricks or high-tech buttons. It was about one thing: displacement. Back then, other car companies like Chevrolet, Ford, and Dodge split their engines into small blocks and big blocks. But not Pontiac. They played by their own rules. Every V8 engine they built came from the same iron block, no matter the size. That gave the GTO Judge a serious edge. It was trying to dominate. From the beginning, the GTO roared with 389 cubic inches. But by 1967, they cranked it up to 400 cubic inches, and they didn't stop there. In 1970, the Judge got something special. Buyers could now choose the optional 455 cubic inch engine. Just imagine that. An engine bigger than some bathtubs, built to tear down highways like a rocket on wheels. This was not just a normal engine. It was a thunder machine, pushing out massive torque and enough horsepower to make tires scream. Why did Pontiac do it? Because they had no choice. Back in the 60s, General Motors had banned racing. Pontiac, hungry to win, turned to the streets instead. They gave everyday people the kind of power usually saved for the racetrack. So when someone says there's no replacement for displacement, the 1970 GTO Judge is the reason why. Number 10, the Judge that was never cheap. Pontiac's pricey plan to beat the Roadrunner. Finally, there was a time when, in the wild world of muscle cars, two giants stood face to face. One was the bold and rumbling Plymouth Roadrunner. The other, the fearless Pontiac GTO Judge. But here's the twist. The Judge was never supposed to be so charming. In fact, the very idea behind this muscle car was to make it cheap. Back in the late 1960s, Pontiac had a problem. Their GTO was powerful, yes, but it wasn't the best deal on the street. Other car makers like Dodge and Chevrolet were bringing out muscle cars that were faster and cheaper. And then came the Plymouth Roadrunner. Tough, cool, and low cost. It became an instant hit. Pontiac needed to strike back, and it did with a 1970 Pontiac GTO Judge. Well, it was supposed to rule the streets and the wallets of car buyers. At first, the plan made sense. Keep the car simple, drop the extras, and beat the Roadrunner in price. But that's not how it turned out. Somewhere along the way, Pontiac did the exact opposite. Instead of keeping it basic, they loaded the Judge with bold colors, flashy stripes, a powerful V8 engine, and eye-catching extras. This budget muscle car ended up costing $368 more than the Roadrunner and even $337 more than the regular GTO. Pontiac had turned their cheap car into the most expensive one on the lot. And there's more. While the GTO was supposed to keep things simple to win the price war, the Roadrunner stuck to its roots. It stayed low cost, no nonsense, and wildly popular. That made it tough for the Judge to live up to its mission. So instead of becoming the budget-friendly hero Pontiac hoped for, the Judge became a pricey muscle king with something to prove. That's the big secret. The Judge was built to beat the Roadrunner on price, but it lost that battle before it even left the factory. Pontiac tried to build a car that ruled the streets for less, but they ended up creating something rare, loud, and expensive. And in doing so, the Judge became a legend, not for its low price, but for how it completely ignored the plan. Now you know what made it so special and so different from what most people think. Which secret surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments. And if you love muscle cars as much as we do, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell icon so you never miss a story.